So tunapanda is a Swahili word that means we are planting, we are climbing, or we are growing. And what we try to do is deliver video learning and computer-focused skill-based education to people at what we call the base of the pyramid, so who don't really have educational opportunities. So out here in Kenya, about 1/3 of teenagers aren't in high school, possibly higher, but at least 1/3 aren't in high school, and that's largely for financial reasons. And those that are in these classrooms of 50 kids, standing in front of a teacher, the traditional way that we've done education for the last however many hundreds of years. And we're trying to teach computer skills, whether that be computer programming, web design, graphic design, video editing, and even the entrepreneurship and business side of things, using different techniques, essentially.
Do you want to tell me about the scholarship program at Rock?
Yeah, so Rock is a partner organization started by a local here from Kibera called Dan. I think you interviewed him. Hopefully people will also be able to see him talking. But he is just a great guy who's had a mission of giving young people, who grew up in the same situation as himself, young people something to do besides getting involved in crime. And he did that for like 7 years. They have a dance team that's winning awards. They did soccer, just stuff to do. And about 3 years ago, some good friends of ours, Jason and Gonche, started a scholarship program with them. So some of the more promising, hardworking kids who are not in high school, because out here in Kenya, like I said, secondary school is very expensive. Primary school is theoretically paid for by the state. There's a lot of expenses that go on the side, but secondary school, you generally pay out of pocket. So they've sent, at the moment it's like 25 kids going to school, and it's really just them, their efforts and their passion, making with Dan, getting this forward. But they've got a good structure for it. There is accountability. The kids have to come. I got involved because the kids who are on scholarship have to come to tutoring every weekend. So it's volunteer tutors, local Kenyans and expats living here who come and tutor the kids in math, science, whatever subjects they're having difficulties with. And that's how we got involved with it. And tunapanda got involved because they used to meet on the weekends in this sort of like shack. They'd rent a church, which is, dirt floors, corrugated tin walls, and that's where we meet, no real light. But about 6 months ago, they opened up a permanent location, which is, it's hard to really understand how big of a deal that is. But if you can imagine that you've grown up in a house with 6 people, and your house is tiny corrugated tin, and everyone's sharing beds, there's no real private space. You can hear what your neighbors are talking about. You can hear what's going on in the streets. You can hear the music from the bar down the street. It just becomes kind of a ridiculous joke that a punishment where I grew up is to be sent to your room. People don't have that private space. So having this center that Rock opened is a really empowering thing for the kids. And it's not something that's just given to them. They have to show commitment, and they have to follow certain rules, and they have to be leaders within the organization. And you can really see the transformation in the kids as they do that. But it was interesting, because on a similar line, one of the things we found that we hadn't expected to be really exciting for kids is that we run LTSP, which is the Linux Terminal Server Project, which allows one server, which we've networked to other computers, to provide, it basically feeds all these other thin client nodes. And the fact that each kid in the program has his or her own login, and they can change their own background, and they can change their settings, and have a private space where they can work on their programming projects. I mean, that was really exciting for them. I remember one guy just got like giddy when he found out that he could change his background, and the next time he logged in on whichever computer, that would be his background. And then the next thing he wanted to do is, well, how can I change this picture? So then we show him, color paint, Inkscape, GIMP, all these, tools that you can use to really personalize that experience. And we hadn't expected that to be such a big deal. I think because we come from a Western background where we have personal space. But when you don't have that personal space, that privacy, that liberty, it becomes a big deal to have that. we run Ubuntu. We run a version of Ubuntu that we've added to ourselves. Ubuntu is a version of Ubuntu with a lot of educational software that's been added to it. So we use it also to support kids who are in high school with their math and science learning, but we've also added things like Scratch, which is an open source programming environment that came out of MIT that's aimed at kids. So you, instead of programming Hello World, using print Hello World, you actually are having these sprites, which are graphical images, and you control them using commands. So you learn the programming structures without having to do the parts of programming that might be less interesting to younger kids. And yeah, we use all open source, everything. So we're trying to basically remove any barriers to replication, copying, to it spreading to anyone who wants to use it. And you can, like, I have people come up to me all the time. I tell them we use GIMP instead of Photoshop, and they're like, oh, well, I can get you Photoshop for free. And it's like, well, of course I know that I can do that for free, but we don't want people to become criminals just to access this learning, just to edit pictures, to have their voice be part of this global online conversation. So there are open source alternatives to pretty much everything we have to use, whether that's Blender for 3D graphic animation, whether it's LibreOffice for word editing, for spreadsheets. So we found that it works, and if you learn on open source and you do need to go and work with a professional team, you know the basics, you know the principles, and jumping to another package isn't particularly difficult. So we've set up some learning centers. We've set up 3 here in Kenya. We've installed software and spread our pedagogy in Uganda and Tanzania. But we haven't actually had any hubs that are needing to connect to each other. But here in Kibera, which is a slum area outside, just sort of in the southern part of Nairobi, I can see us needing to connect different nodes together. And the thing about mesh networks, and the thing about part of why our mission started, is we wanted to spread video learning courses in places where people didn't know about video learning, and also where downloading video is expensive. So we think of a free video on YouTube as actually being free. But if you're using your mobile phone, or if you're paying per minute at a cyber cafe that has laggy download, you are taking money that you could be using for food and using that for content. So think about mesh networks and open source stacks that can push content around. I think that can make video faster for existing cyber cafes. So instead of having to have their customers, watch laggy video, they could be faster, and it can also, in a low-cost way, spread it to a lot more people, I think. And so we're just starting to investigate those now. But I'm really hoping within the next year to set up what will be sort of a prototype, walk-by library, where you can walk by on your way to work if you have a smartphone, or even any phone that can do audio, and you can get your free content, whether that's podcasts, TED Talks, educational resources created here and given away for free, because anything we create, we push under a Creative Commons license, so people can take it, learn from it, remix it, add their own language. So what I sort of see is these mesh networks being ways that people can have what's sort of like a local library, where you pull the best stuff from the world, but you also have your neighbor's stuff put on there. And that's going to be, I think, more interesting to you than something created by, a techie in Silicon Valley.
How do you think that the fact that these 25 kids could add in the wider community?
Just the ability to express yourself, and we'll look at the graphic design side of what we teach. Just that ability to express yourself and create images that speak for your community is very empowering and very important. You shouldn't have to pay someone if you want to make a little ad for your local dance team if you can't afford to pay them. And that, having that voice, I think, raises self-esteem for communities and for the individuals involved in doing it. And that, to me, so you sort of think like art is a luxury. Like, you need your plumbing, you need your medicine, and then art is some luxury after that. But the more I see out here of people, the joy they get and the fulfillment they get from expressing themselves creatively through art, the more I think that art is almost a basic human right. Art, and we know that free speech is, most countries and most people believe that free speech is important and a fundamental human right. But if you can't use that speech to express yourself, what's the use of it? So I'm really expecting to see, this free software, free content catch on with certain early adopters and really help them get through these obstacles that luck has essentially put in their way. And beyond that, I mean, the tool, whether it's mesh networks, whether it's, like if you're in a country like Somalia, which is one country north of Kenya, the Al-Shabaab recently banned the internet. So they said, anyone who uses the internet, we're going to blow up your building. The official government, we're not sure who's in control. The official government said, no, the internet's good. But, for a lot of people, cryptography, the ability to spread information, the ability to accept payments with Bitcoin or whatever is kind of a toy. But if you consider someone living in Al-Shabaab controlled zone where violence, gunfire, lack of personal liberty is a daily reality, then you can really see the potential for mesh networks, for Bitcoin, for open learning to literally save someone's life. I mean, the fact that it's encrypted and they can't be tracked, could literally save someone's life in theory. And I don't think I'm really exaggerating too much on that. But yeah, it's, what's a toy for some people could actually be, the key to learning math or learning computer programming or learning something that lets that person change their situation in the future. I personally, what I like about Bitcoin is, like you said, not as a financial speculative instrument. I mean, whether or not Bitcoin survives is pretty much irrelevant to the fact that it's a way of getting people interested in currency, it's a way of getting people interested in money and how that works. And to me, that's something that should be taught in high school, the history of money. I made what might be a mistake, and I left engineering to study economics. So my degree's in economics, and one of the best courses I took was the history of money, and it really changes the way you look at the world. Most people use money nowadays of some sort, whether it's your credit card, cash, bank account, and just having an understanding of that, I think, is very empowering. And I think it's important for democracies to function properly as well. Having people who understand how money works, how it can be used for the public good, or how it can be manipulated for special interests. And Bitcoin is definitely obviously the front runner in terms of a decentralized open transaction network. And I think as an educational tool, there's a lot of potential there.